My wife cheated on me with her coworker while stealing from me. I exposed her, but she had a secret plan to destroy my family. I never thought I'd be here, writing this out for strangers on the internet. But here I am, because my life has taken a turn I never saw coming. My name's Jake, I'm 35, and I've been married to Melissa for 9 years. We have a beautiful daughter, Lily, who's 7, and I thought we had a pretty solid marriage. Turns out, I was dead wrong. We met in college. You know the story. Young love, inseparable, did everything together. We got married 2 years after graduating, bought a house in the suburbs, and settled into what I thought was a happy life. Melissa is smart, funny, and honestly, drop-dead gorgeous. People used to tell me I was lucky to have her, and I believed it. I trusted her completely. But lately, something's changed. Melissa's been distant. She used to be affectionate, always touching, hugging, even playful, but now she barely looks at me. When I asked her if something was wrong, she'd brush it off, saying she was just tired or stressed from work. I bought it. Why wouldn't I? She's always been busy with her career, and I didn't want to add more pressure by questioning her. I figured it was just a rough patch, something we'd get through together like we always did. But a few weeks ago, I noticed she started getting these late-night texts. She'd smile at her phone, but when I asked who it was, she'd say it was nobody and tuck the phone away like it was no big deal. My gut told me something wasn't right, but I pushed it aside. I didn't want to be that guy, jealous, paranoid. I trusted her. The turning point came one Saturday night. Melissa had told me she was going out with some friends from work. Just a casual dinner, she said. I didn't think much of it, though she had been going out more often lately. I stayed home with Lily, put her to bed, and settled on the couch to watch a movie. Around 11 p.m., I texted Melissa to see if she was on her way home. No response. Midnight came, and still nothing. I started getting anxious, but I told myself she was probably just having a good time and had lost track of time. By 1 a.m., I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I called her, and it went straight to voicemail. That's when I noticed something. Her laptop was on the kitchen counter. Melissa always took her laptop to work, and I mean always. She never left it behind. I wasn't the type to snoop, but something in my gut pushed me to open it. Her laptop wasn't password protected, which was odd for someone who worked in IT. I clicked around a bit, feeling like an idiot for even considering what I was doing. That's when I found the emails, hundreds of them. They were with a guy named Greg, a guy she'd told me about once or twice, someone from her office. The emails were flirty at first, but they escalated quickly, talking about meeting up, about how last night was incredible and how they couldn't wait to see each other again. My heart sank. It was like getting punched in the stomach, but the pain was worse. My hands shook as I read them. Melissa wasn't out with her friends. She was with him. I was frozen for a moment, staring at the screen, reading and rereading the words. It felt like time had stopped. My wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, was cheating on me, and with someone from her office, no less. All the late nights, the work trips, the sudden distance between us, it all started to make sense. I didn't want to believe it, but the proof was right there in front of me. The last email was from earlier that day. They'd planned to meet at a hotel, and judging by the timestamp, they were probably still together. That's when I lost it. I slammed the laptop shut and paced the kitchen, my mind racing with 100 thoughts at once. I wanted to scream, punch something. Hell, I even considered driving to that hotel and confronting them both. But I didn't know what good that would do. What was I supposed to say? That I knew? That I had proof? The anger was eating me alive, but then Lily woke up. I heard her little voice from upstairs, calling out for me. It snapped me back to reality. I couldn't lose control, not with her here. So I took a deep breath, went upstairs and calmed her down. I tucked her back into bed, kissed her goodnight, and tried to act like everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. After getting Lily back to sleep, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring into the dark, waiting for Melissa to come home. My mind was racing, but at the same time, I felt numb. Part of me didn't even want to see her. What was I supposed to do when she walked through the door? Pretend I didn't know? Or blow up and demand answers? Around 2 a.m., I heard the front door creak open. Melissa tiptoed in, trying to be quiet like she'd just had a perfectly normal night out with friends. She didn't know I was awake, watching from the shadows. She smelled like perfume, not hers. I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the anger that was boiling inside me. She started taking off her shoes by the door, her phone in her hand. I could see her smiling down at the screen, probably texting him. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Have a good time," I said, my voice cold and sharp. Melissa jumped, clearly not expecting me to be awake. She turned around, her face pale. "Jake, I didn't know you were up." "Yeah, I bet you didn't." I stood up and walked toward her, trying to keep my voice steady. "So, was it a fun night with the girls?" She hesitated, just for a second, and that was all it took. I knew she was about to lie. "Yeah, it was nice. We had dinner, just caught up." I cut her off. Don't lie to me, Melissa." Her face changed. She looked panicked, like a deer caught in headlights. "What are you talking about?" "I know. I saw the emails." Melissa's face went from shock to denial in a heartbeat. "Emails? What emails?" she asked, her voice shaky, but still trying to play it cool. "Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about, Melissa." I stepped closer, feeling the rage building up again. "I saw everything. You and Greg, the hotel, the late-night meetups, all of it." Her eyes widened, and for a second, I thought she was going to come clean. But instead, she crossed her arms and tried to twist it around. "You've been going through my emails? What the hell, Jake? That's an invasion of my privacy." I couldn't believe it. Here she was, caught red-handed, and she was trying to turn it on me. "Are you serious right now? You're cheating on me, and you're mad because I found out." She didn't answer. Instead, she just stood there, biting her lip like she was trying to figure out her next move. Then, out of nowhere, she started crying. "It's not what you think," she sobbed. "Greg and we've just been talking. I was stressed out from work, and he was there for me. But nothing serious happened, Jake. I swear." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that maybe it was just some emotional thing, that maybe it hadn't gone too far. But the emails didn't lie, and neither did the gut feeling I'd been ignoring for months. "Don't lie to me, Melissa. I read everything. You've been sleeping with him, haven't you?" She looked away, her tears still streaming down her face. That's when I knew. She didn't even have to say it. The silence between us felt like a heavy weight, suffocating. Melissa wiped her face, avoiding eye contact, and finally, in the quietest voice, she said, "Yes, but it wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman I'd been with for nearly a decade, the mother of my child, was standing in front of me, admitting she'd slept with another man, and then trying to tell me it didn't matter. It didn't mean anything? Are you serious? I practically shouted. You threw away our marriage, our family, for something that didn't mean anything? How long, Melissa? How long have you been seeing him? She hesitated again, biting her lip, as if calculating whether or not to tell me the full truth. "A few months," she finally whispered. I felt like my world was collapsing. Every moment of the last few months started flashing in my mind. Her late nights, her secretive texts, the coldness between us. It all made sense now, and it was crushing. "I can't believe this," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "How could you do this to me? To us? Was I not enough for you?" She finally looked up at me, tears still running down her face. "Jake, I never meant to hurt you. It just happened. I don't even know how we got here. I love you. I really do." I laughed, but it was bitter. "Love? You don't cheat on someone you love, Melissa. You don't lie to them. sneak around behind their back, and sleep with someone else. Melissa stood there, still crying, but now she was starting to get defensive. You don't understand, Jake. Things between us, they haven't been the same. You've been distant, always focused on work, on the house, on Lily, and I felt alone. Greg was just there when I needed someone to talk to. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Now it was my fault. So this is on me now? You felt alone. So you decided the best way to handle that was to sleep with someone else. Instead of talking to me, instead of working on our marriage, you just gave up. She shook her head, sobbing harder. I didn't give up. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It just did, and I'm sorry, Jake. I really am. I stood there, staring at her, feeling every emotion possible rushing through me. Anger, betrayal, sadness. It was like a tidal wave crashing down over me, and I didn't know how to stop it. You're sorry? You think that fixes this? I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To our family. Her eyes were wide now, like she was truly realizing how deep this wound was. She reached out for me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. Don't touch me. Melissa's hand dropped to her side, and for a moment, she just stood there, staring at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. Maybe she didn't. I wasn't sure I recognized myself anymore either. I had always thought of myself as a calm, rational guy. But standing there, facing her betrayal, I felt like I was coming apart at the seams. You don't get it, do you? I said, my voice shaking. You broke us. Everything we've built, our marriage, our home, our family. How am I supposed to trust you now? How am I supposed to look at you and not think of him? She crumbled onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. Jake, please don't say that. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through it. I'll do anything. I love you. I love Lily. I don't want to lose this, I swear. Her words felt empty, like they couldn't even begin to cover the damage. It was too late for promises. All I could see was the image of her and Greg together, while I was at home with our daughter, completely clueless. Counseling? I scoffed. Melissa, do you really think I can just sit in a room with you and pretend like we can fix this? That I'll ever trust you again? You've been lying to me for months. Months. She kept crying, begging, but I was beyond hearing it. I turned away, running a hand over my face, trying to calm the storm inside me, but there was no calming it. Not after this. I couldn't stand to be in the same room as her anymore. Every breath felt heavy, like the walls were closing in on me. I turned toward the door, grabbing my jacket off the chair. Where are you going? She asked, her voice trembling. I need to get out of here, I muttered, not even turning around. I can't do this right now. Jake, please, don't leave. We can talk about this. I'll explain everything. Just stay and we'll figure it out. But I was already halfway out the door, my mind set on one thing: escape. I couldn't deal with her lies, her excuses. I needed to clear my head, to think, to get away from the person I thought I knew but now felt like a complete stranger. I got in the car and started driving, not even sure where I was going. I just drove, the streets blurring past as I tried to process what had happened. How had my life turned into this? How had my wife, the woman I had loved and trusted for so long, become someone who could betray me like this? I found myself pulling into an empty parking lot, killing the engine, and just sitting there in silence. The shock was wearing off, but what replaced it was worse. I felt hollow, like everything I thought I knew had been ripped away. The love we had, the family we built, it all felt like a lie now. Sitting in that parking lot, I felt lost. The reality of it all was sinking in, and it hit me like a freight train. My wife had been unfaithful. She had lied to my face for months, sneaking around with some guy from her office while I stayed home, completely in the dark. How long had I been a fool? How many nights had I kissed her goodnight while she was thinking about him? The thought made my stomach turn. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, hoping the physical pain would distract me from the emotional storm inside, but it didn't. I kept replaying our confrontation in my head. Her tears, her excuses, her empty promises to fix things. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't trust her. Not anymore. The woman I thought I knew, the one I had promised to spend my life with, had shattered everything. After what felt like hours, I started the car again and drove back home. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, or even if I could face her again, but I had to go back, for Lily, if nothing else. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. I stepped inside quietly, trying to gather myself before going upstairs. I found Melissa sitting on the couch, still in the same spot, her face buried in her hands. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Jake," she whispered, her voice broken. "I'm so sorry." Her apology hung in the air, but it felt hollow. I stood there for a moment, just staring at her. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers, to yell about how sorry wasn't enough. But I was exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. I didn't have the energy for another confrontation. "I don't know what you expect me to say," I finally muttered, my voice flat. "Sorry doesn't undo what you've done." She stood up, her hands trembling. "I know it doesn't, Jake, but I'm begging you, please don't give up on us. We've been through so much together. We can fix this. I'll do anything." Her words felt desperate, but I wasn't sure if it was out of guilt or genuine regret. Could she really be sorry, or was she just trying to save face now that I had found out? I ran a hand through my hair and sat down on the armchair, keeping as much distance between us as possible. "How am I supposed to believe you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've been lying to me for months, Melissa. You didn't think about us when you were with him. You didn't think about Lily, about our family. How do I just forget that?" She collapsed back onto the couch, her face in her hands again, sobbing. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just—" "Stop," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "I don't want to hear excuses. You made your choices. Now we have to deal with the fallout." The room was thick with silence after that. I could hear her crying softly, but I couldn't bring myself to feel anything but numbness. The anger I'd felt earlier was gone, replaced by this hollow emptiness that I couldn't shake. I couldn't look at her, not without picturing her with him, in some cheap hotel room, doing things that were supposed to be just between us. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely audible. "What do you want me to do, Jake? I'll do anything to make this right." I stared at the floor, unable to answer her right away. What did I want her to do? Could anything she did really make this better? I didn't know anymore. The life we had built together felt like it was crumbling around me, and I didn't know if it could ever be put back together. "I don't know, Melissa," I said quietly. "I don't know what you can do. I don't even know if I want to fix this." Her breath hitched at my words, and I could hear her crying harder. Part of me felt guilty, but the other part, the one still reeling from the betrayal, didn't care. I stood up, feeling like I needed space, like the walls were closing in on me. "I need time," I said, heading for the stairs. "I need to think." She didn't try to stop me this time. I could feel her eyes on me as I walked up to our bedroom, but she didn't say anything. I shut the door behind me and collapsed on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, wondering how my life had gone so wrong. That night, I barely slept. My mind wouldn't shut off, constantly replaying everything. Her confession, the emails, the cold fact that the woman I loved had betrayed me. I kept telling myself I had to be strong for Lily, but I didn't even know what that meant anymore. What was the next step? Was I supposed to just forgive her? Pretend this never happened for the sake of our daughter? Morning came too quickly, and I heard the soft sounds of Melissa moving around downstairs. The weight of it all still felt crushing. I stayed in bed until I heard Lily waking up. I knew I had to put on a brave face for her, no matter how wrecked I felt inside. I went downstairs and found Melissa at the kitchen table, her face swollen and red from crying all night. She glanced up at me, but we didn't say a word to each other. Our silence said everything. Lily ran in and hugged me, her usual bright smile making my chest ache. She didn't know anything was wrong, and I wanted to keep it that way. For now, at least. I made breakfast for her, trying to act like everything was fine, but I could feel Melissa's eyes on me the whole time. After we ate, I took Lily outside to play in the yard, needing a break from the tension in the house. Melissa came out after a while, standing at the door, watching us. I could see the guilt on her face, the regret. But I couldn't stop thinking that if I hadn't found those emails, she'd still be lying to me. As the days passed, things between Melissa and me remained tense. We were barely speaking, unless it was about Lily. Every time she tried to talk to me, to say she was sorry again, I'd shut her down. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to see her try to explain away the damage she'd done. It was easier to avoid it altogether. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, Melissa cornered me in the living room. She stood in front of the TV, forcing me to look at her, her eyes pleading. "Jake, we can't keep going on like this. You're barely even here anymore. I don't know how to fix this if you won't talk to me." I looked at her, feeling that familiar anger rising again. "What do you want me to say, Melissa? That I forgive you? That we can go back to how things were?" I shook my head. "I don't know if that's even possible." She knelt down in front of me, grabbing my hands. "Please, I love you. I love our family. I'm so sorry for everything I did, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Just don't walk away from us. Don't give up on us." I stared at her, my heart torn. Part of me still loved her, the woman I thought she was, the life we'd built together. But another part of me, the part she had betrayed, was screaming at me to run, to leave before she hurt me again. "I need time," I finally said, pulling my hands away. "I'm not walking away, but I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." After our first counseling session, I felt numb. Melissa had poured her heart out to the therapist, talking about how sorry she was and how she never meant to hurt me. But honestly, I couldn't bring myself to feel anything. Sitting there, listening to her try to explain why she cheated, it was like I was hearing someone else's story, not my own. The therapist asked me how I was feeling, and I didn't know what to say. How was I feeling? Angry? Hurt? Betrayed? All of the above? Or maybe just exhausted? I was tired of the lies, the broken promises, the pretending. Most of all, I was tired of trying to figure out if I could ever trust her again. Melissa seemed hopeful after the session, but I wasn't sure where I stood. I wanted to believe that we could fix things, for Lily's sake if nothing else. But a part of me kept screaming that it was over, that no amount of therapy could put the pieces back together. Every time I looked at Melissa, all I could see was her betrayal. That night, as we sat in the living room in silence, I realized how far we'd fallen from the couple we used to be. Once, we were happy. Now, we were just two broken people sitting in a broken home, pretending things could go back to the way they were. A few nights after the counseling session, something strange happened. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I got a message from an unknown number. It was a simple text. "You need to know the truth about Melissa." At first, I thought it was some kind of prank, but then I got another message. "It's not just Greg. Check her email, the hidden one." My heart raced. Hidden email? I hadn't even considered that there could be more secrets. Curiosity took over, and while Melissa was in the shower, I grabbed her phone. I hadn't looked through it since the night I discovered her affair with Greg, but now I was on a mission. I followed the steps from the text and, sure enough, found a second email account. My stomach dropped as I opened it. There were messages, dozens of them, between Melissa and not just Greg, but 3 other men. She had been having multiple affairs. One of them went back nearly 2 years. 2 years of lies. 2 years of betrayal. But that wasn't the worst part. There was one particular email chain that froze me to the core. It wasn't about sex. It was about money. Melissa had been siphoning money from our joint account, thousands of dollars, and sending it to someone, a man I didn't know, a man who was apparently blackmailing her. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was reading. Melissa had gotten herself tangled in something far more dangerous than just cheating. She was in deep, so deep. She'd been using our family's savings to keep this man quiet. And from the tone of the emails, he wasn't done with her yet. I sat there, stunned, as the reality of what I had just uncovered sank in. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. Melissa was being blackmailed by someone, and she had been draining our savings to keep it hidden. But who was this guy? And what could he possibly have on her that was worth thousands of dollars? My mind raced as I scrolled through the emails. The messages from the man were vague, but one thing was clear. This had been going on for a while, and it wasn't just about her affairs. There were threats. Serious ones. He knew where we lived, where Lily went to school. It was clear that Melissa was terrified of him. I heard the water from the shower stop, and panic set in. I quickly closed the emails and put her phone back where I found it, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her? Go to the police? The blackmailer's threats were chilling, and I didn't know how dangerous this guy really was. When Melissa came downstairs, she acted like nothing was wrong, completely oblivious to the fact that I knew everything. I couldn't look at her the same way. Not only had she destroyed our marriage, but now our entire family was at risk because of her reckless actions. That night, I lay in bed, wide awake, thinking about Lily. If this guy really knew that much about us, then she wasn't safe. I wasn't sure what Melissa had gotten herself into, but it was clear this was bigger than just cheating. I needed to figure out how to protect my daughter, and fast. The next morning, I couldn't look at Melissa without feeling a mix of anger and fear. She was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee like nothing was wrong, while I was drowning in the knowledge of what she'd done. I had to act. I wasn't about to let this man threaten my family, but I needed more information before I made my move. After dropping Lily off at school, I called in sick to work and started digging deeper into the emails. I found a pattern. The blackmailer always reached out when Melissa tried to cut off contact or slow down the payments. There was one recurring demand in the messages that stood out. You owe me more than just money. What the hell did that mean? One of the emails gave me a clue. The man was demanding Melissa meet him that week in person. It wasn't just money anymore. He wanted something else from her, and the tone of his messages suggested it wasn't just to settle a debt. My mind went to dark places, imagining the worst scenarios. I knew this was my chance to catch him and figure out what kind of danger we were really in. I could feel my pulse quicken as I decided to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't going to confront Melissa yet. I needed her to go through with the meeting so I could follow her and see who this guy was. It was risky, and I knew it. But if this man had been threatening our family for years, I couldn't just sit back and let him continue. I had to put an end to it, one way or another. The day of the meeting came quicker than I expected. Melissa told me she had an errand to run, but I knew exactly where she was going. My heart was pounding in my chest as I followed her in my car, keeping a safe distance. She was driving toward a part of town I wasn't familiar with, run-down, industrial, the kind of place you didn't want to be after dark. She pulled into the parking lot of an old, abandoned warehouse. I parked down the street, far enough away that I wouldn't be seen, but close enough to watch. She got out of the car and hesitated, looking around nervously, before walking toward the building. I watched her disappear inside, and every instinct told me to follow her, but I stayed in the car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't know what I was waiting for, some kind of proof, some clue about what was really going on. After a few minutes, a man emerged from the shadows. Tall, wearing a hooded jacket, his face mostly hidden. He approached the warehouse door where Melissa had gone in, looking around like he was making sure no one was watching. But I was. He slipped inside, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. The guy who'd been blackmailing my wife, threatening my family. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I couldn't just sit there. I got out of the car, my hands shaking, and started walking toward the building. As I got closer, I could hear voices inside. Melissa's was muffled, but I could tell she was upset. Then I heard the man, his voice low, cold, and commanding. He wasn't just asking for money anymore. I burst into the warehouse, ready to face whatever was inside. What I saw left me frozen in shock. Greg, the same man Melissa had cheated on me with, stood there, not as the lover I'd imagined, but as something far darker. He wasn't just a fling. He was the one controlling her. Melissa stood trembling, her face pale, as she looked between Greg and me. The weight of everything crashed down on me in that moment. This wasn't just an affair. It had never been just about sex. It was something far more sinister. Greg wasn't merely a lover. He was a manipulator, and Melissa had been trapped. The truth hit me like a freight train. Melissa had been siphoning money from our accounts for years, feeding it into whatever twisted game Greg was playing. At first, maybe it was just to help him. Maybe she thought she was in control, but somewhere along the line, she lost herself and Greg had taken over. He'd been blackmailing her, controlling her every move, and now he wanted more. The worst part was, she hadn't stopped him. She had let it all happen, dragging me, dragging our daughter, into her nightmare. As I stood there, watching Greg smirk as if he held all the power, a sick realization washed over me. Every lie, every late night, every stolen dollar had led to this moment. The affair had just been a cover for something deeper, something darker. And Melissa? She had been complicit. I didn't need to hear more. I didn't need her apologies or Greg's smug explanations. I turned my back on both of them, the weight of betrayal heavier than I ever thought possible. I walked out, feeling the cold night air hit my face, knowing that my life as I knew it was over. As I drove away, the reality settled in. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about deception on a level I couldn't even comprehend. My wife had betrayed me not only with her body, but with our life, our trust, and our future. She'd made me a pawn in her twisted game with Greg, and now there was no going back. By the time I got home, I knew what I had to do. I would file for divorce, get full custody of Lily, and move on. There was no saving this marriage, no repairing what was broken. Melissa had crossed every line, and there was nothing left for me here but the rubble of what used to be our life. The next morning, I packed my things, called a lawyer, and made arrangements to protect my daughter. Melissa had destroyed everything, but I wasn't going to let her destroy me, or my future. And as I left that house, I realized, sometimes, the person you think you know best is the one who can hide the darkest secrets. And once those secrets come out, there's no going back.